here's what we're hoping to do today. We're going to introduce ourselves and then ask you a couple of questions so we have some sense of the familiarity you have either with the product and with the concepts we're talking about. I'm going to talk a little bit about big picture stuff, right? How the world of marketing is changing, and then also a bit of what the Sitecore DMS actually does so that there's context for when Pim describes how it's actually been deployed at the Rotman School of Business. And then finally, we'll take your questions and have some concluding thoughts. Feel free to interrupt at any time during this. I'll try to answer intelligently, and if not, I'll move on swiftly. How's that sound? So, Pim, why don't you introduce us?
Oh, I hate that picture.
Sorry. It's a photo I had. But you're actually here, though. We can look at you instead of the photo if you prefer. We can.
I've been at Rotman for 3 years, at U of T for 5, and I've come to the school with a range of corporate and cultural background. And one of the first things I did when I got to the school was to redo the website, which had been built in approximately 1995 in our own IT shop. So it was so long in the need for a makeover that this has been just a marvelous thing. And we've come so far with Nonlinear. We just launched our mobile site. So if you go to www.rotman.utoronto.ca on your phone today, you'll tag into the new launch mobile version of the site, which is really exciting. So we've done the site redesign, mobile, and the DMS work. So it's been a very fruitful and exciting partnership.
Well, thanks, Pim. That's a heavily Photoshopped picture of me, as you can tell.
That's what I need, is I need a Photoshop version.
It's good to have people in-house that can do that for you, actually. It's what we're thanking on to. So I'm a co-founder at Nonlinear, which means that you can blame me for whatever goes wrong. I carry the president title, and really, since 1995, we've been trying to figure out how to take advantage of the internet on behalf of our clients. What that means changes about every 2 years, so does my what I actually do for a living. But the last 4 years, I've been spending a lot of time looking at the digital marketing system within the Sitecore platform and understanding how to apply some of the data-driven marketing tactics that seem most relevant to our clients. And so that's really been the piece of the puzzle that's most relevant here. I'm also the CFO, but that's probably not going to matter for today's presentation. At Randy Woods, that's me on Twitter. Feel free to follow me, and I do answer questions there as well. So that's us. Let me ask some questions of you folks. So by show of hands, how many of you are responsible for websites that are currently running on the Sitecore CMS? Well, there's more than that. No? Okay. Okay, how about other CMS products? All right. Are any of you making use of the Sitecore DMS right now? Yeah, Joe, you don't count, and Rotman doesn't count. Okay. So in that case, I'll give you a bit of background on the product just so it's clear what we're talking about. Had you heard of the DMS before we started plaguing you with phone calls? Okay, good. There's some nods happening. How many of you have actually executed or planned an A/B or multivariate test before? How many of you actually recognize those terms? Do they make sense? Most? Okay, great, good. Just so we know kind of where to pitch this. Good. So that's great. That suggests that what we have prepared for you might be of some interest. I don't know what I would have done if you answered those questions differently, but hopefully this will be okay. I'm going to spend just a couple of seconds, and it won't be long. Really, the meat of this presentation will be Pim's discussion of how this works in the real world. But I think it's helpful sometimes to have some context for what's happening before you plunge into the details of the case study. There's a shift happening in marketing in general and in the world of content management specifically from the ability to publish to the ability to deliver outcomes. And what I mean is, rather than products simply solving the problem of how do you get content live, how do you get it approved, how do you manage translation, the focus about 4 years ago began shifting, well, once the content's live, how do we make it actually deliver business results for us? More leads, more students, more subscriptions, whatever you're trying to accomplish with your website, more donations. And that shift has been really significant, and I think that underpins most of what we're saying here. So you'll see that most of the web content management vendors are extending into a space that has more to do with managing the performance of the website, the business performance of the website, than it does simply the publication of the content. And it's not just me saying this and making it up. If you actually go on to Google Trends, I think they changed the name again, but the idea is you can track people's interest by what they're searching on. And this is just a very quick graph that looks at the term content marketing and A/B testing. So arguably, what's happened in the last I don't know, decade or so, is that traditional means of marketing are losing some of their reliability. Or possibly people are becoming less enthused about spending their money in marketing activities where they can't actually determine what the outcome is. I'm not quite sure which is the answer, but there's a shift away from, say, newspaper display advertising and towards more measurable mechanisms. And as part of that, what you're seeing is that rather than trying to interrupt people and get your advertising in front of them, there's a real shift towards helping them as a way of becoming engaged with them and making sure they understand who you are. So that's broadly termed content marketing. It's not a great term, but it's what the world has decided on. You'll see it's the blue line. And really about 2007, it started being discussed, and then it kind of has increased dramatically as time's gone on. I think it's kind of funny that it starts being discussed in 2007, because the first example I know of was the John Deere Harvester magazine. I think it was 1892 it was released. And that's exactly what it was, right? Very helpful information to their core target audience that increased their brand awareness. And this is all the same thing. If you've been in a technology company, for years they published white papers trying to be helpful to their audience in the hopes they would eventually buy the product. What's changed now is it's not just technology companies. You've got people who are running used car lots who are producing a guide to used cars with the intention of making sure you come to them when you're looking for a used car. So that shift is really significant. But along with the shift of producing content that's helpful, you have to find a way to get it in front of the right people. And that's where you start seeing things like A/B testing and personalization become really important. It's not enough just to create the content. You have to find a way to get that content in front of the people that care about it. And I think that is fundamentally what the Sitecore DMS allows you to do. This is all, of course, underpinned by this shift. I probably don't have to overstate it. On the right, you see newspaper advertising revenue adjusted for inflation. Not a great time to be in the newspaper gig, although I don't have the numbers from 2011 till now. Apparently, they've recovered a bit. But I guess the point I'm making is there is a shift away from that. And on the left, you see the increase in digital marketing spend. So again, this is all underpinning this fairly dramatic shift in the relationship between a marketer and the person being marketed to. The power has kind of shifted to the recipients of the marketing activities from the marketer, right? So they can talk back on social media. They can turn the channel or visit a different website very quickly. It's no longer the world where you have 3 channels and you can run advertising and they have to watch it or they can no longer see Leave It to Beaver, right? The world has changed dramatically. And to take advantage of it, you need a different infrastructure than what you've had in the past. And I think you see this shift happening in the world, not just because I'm telling you, but if you look at the analysts, what they cover and how they label things are changing. So Forrester used to cover web content management, and they recently relabeled that web content management for digital customer experiences, right? So it's about the customer experience now. The Gartner Group added CRM multi-channel campaign management to what used to be the web content management coverage. And you have new analyst groups like the Digital Clarity Group, who's introduced their web content and customer experience management coverage. So you always know something's happening in the technology sphere whenever you get a battle of acronyms or when the analysts start introducing brand new terms, right? But the important thing here is that underpinning this shift in how marketers have to perform is a shift in the technology that's available to you. And I think that's really what the Sitecore digital marketing system is. It's an opportunity to take advantage of this shift and put those tools in the hands of the marketers. When I talk about those tools, though, it's helpful to be a little more specific than that. So let me just walk through quickly the pieces of the puzzle that we think are most compelling from the Sitecore digital marketing system and the ones we've seen deliver the best results in the real world most quickly. Visitor engagement. So this is a concept that's unique to Sitecore and important to understand. A lot of people have tracked the number of visits to their website. And if you have a conversion point like sales or donations or subscriptions or lead generation, you might count the number of outcomes associated. Engagement lies someplace in between. The idea is that not all visits are of equal value to you. Some deliver more valuable, more engaged visitors. And by measuring that, you're able to actually figure out which of your marketing campaigns are most effective in driving high value, highly engaged visitors. So it's an intermediary step in some ways between a simple visit and the outcome. Visitor profiles. Any individual visiting your site, you can build up a profile of what they've looked at and do that in an aggregate way that makes it actually usable as opposed to every single page or image they saw. A/B and multivariate testing. If you're not doing this, you might want to look at it. I think it's probably the most underutilized tactic available to online marketers today. The idea is very simple. You try image A, you try image B, and you see which one actually produces better results. You make sure it's statistically valid before you make your decision. But by doing that, you can incrementally get better at whatever it is you're trying to accomplish. It's easy to do. The Sitecore Digital DMS makes it very, very easy to do. And I think, again, it's the one thing you can do today that will dramatically increase the outcomes you're getting with the same expenditures. Rules-based personalization, and this gets a little bit technical, but I want to be clear about it. So this is the idea. I want the right content to be in front of you. Rules-based personalization is I can build rules based on what I know about you. I know a handful of things. I know what keywords you searched on at Google, for example, before you came to the website. I know what geography you're from. I can look that up from your IP address. I may know what institution you're from. So for example, I might target content based on American visitors to my website very differently than Canadian visitors. That's a fairly common use. Persona-based personalization is a little bit more difficult to describe quickly, but the idea is once I've built a visitor profile, if I know from your previous visits and the content you've looked at that you're really interested in product A, then on your return to the site, I will show you product A, for example. We're currently doing this with SunGard Financial Systems. They have something like 322 products, so very difficult navigation. Once you've looked at a product in depth, though, on your return visits, the navigation shifts to that profile. So it gives you a sense of what I mean by persona-based personalization. Explicit personalization is awesome if you have a CRM system and people actually self-identify. So if I know who you are and your data is in my CRM system, I can tie the two of these together and explicitly personalize for you. An example of this would be for not-for-profit we've worked with, and now I can't remember whether it was AOPA or IIC. AOPA? They did the membership personalization? Okay, great. The Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association. Joe's actually my backup brain, so that's why he's here today. In their case, they know when their members are coming up for renewal, and so they personalize the content based on how close that renewal is for membership. So 6 weeks before your membership renewals due, you might get a discounted offer, whereas 1 week beforehand, you might not. So they can build rules based on what's in the CRM for known visitors. So it's very different conceptually than showing the right content to somebody who you don't know who happens to come from India. Engagement plans allow you to structure ongoing contact with people, say sending them emails on a scheduled basis after they've actually signed up. We use this at Nonlinear for recruiting. We designed some assets like a white paper called .NET SharePoint for .NET developers, which is downloaded by people who apparently know .NET and have an interest in SharePoint, which is the kind of people we want to hire. And then we put them in an engagement plan that emails them periodically over an 18-month period so that when the time comes for us to hire, we have a group of people who might be interested in joining Nonlinear. So that's the idea of an engagement plan. Lead scoring. Based on your behavior, I can figure out whether the direct sales team should be calling you now or whether you, in fact, aren't ready to purchase. It allows you to narrow the activities and focus them on the most likely outcomes, most promising outcomes. Sales enablement, if you do this right, you can actually plug what a visitor does online, their visitor profile, into your CRM system, and the salespeople can look at it and say, oh, this visitor seems to really care about A, B, and C, and gives them an advantage when they're making the phone call. So that's kind of the spectrum of things that the DMS can do. There's more. There's social integration, it does mobile delivery very well, et cetera, but that's probably enough for you to actually kind of consume in one slide, and probably more than I intended to say. We'll talk about this today at a very high level. Just a handful of things about these tactics that I want to convey before I actually have Pim talk about how this works in the real world. The first is that all those tactics fall into two categories. Some of them are very quick to do and give you impact quickly. Others have more promise for high ROI, but they take longer. And so when you're thinking about this, the rules-based personalization, A/B testing, and engagement plans can all be set up very quickly, really within weeks of you installing the DMS. Things like profile-based personalization, you need to instrument the site so that you can actually detect which persona they're in. And then you need time for that profile to build up. So it's not going to happen tomorrow. It takes longer to deliver the ROI. Explicit personalization, you have to do the integration with your CRM system. That tends to be a more difficult, more challenging project than simply deploying A/B testing. The same is true of sales enablement and lead scoring. And engagement value, again, requires you to think through what does count as engagement on your site, and then measure that on the site. So we tend to look at this as two different categories. Do the stuff on the left quickly, because there's no barriers to you doing it. You should be doing it tomorrow. The stuff on the right, figure out which ones are going to give you the highest return on investment, and then prioritize them based on return on investment. That's kind of how we see the world of Sitecore DMS breaking down. And then finally, you have to figure out which ones count for the scenario you're in as well. And this will be different for virtually every organization. If you're in a short sales cycle, if you're selling books online, and you sell that book once to that person and they never come back, then things like A/B testing or multivariate testing or rules-based personalization probably offer you the biggest return on investment. Whereas if you're in a considered sales cycle, you're selling a $250,000 telco switch or an expensive software product, probably you're looking at things like engagement value, where you can measure traffic over time, or an engagement plan so that you can nurture your leads. It's a different kind of context, and which of the tactics matter will depend very much on what kind of business you're in. And then finally, if you have repeat purchase, so something like a not-for-profit that has membership and has to drive membership renewals, you might be looking at things like explicit CRM-driven personalization or engagement plans. And so the point of this slide is that you need to think through what you're trying to accomplish and how these tactics can add the most value to your organization, depending on what it is that you need to do to make a difference. That's all complicated, and this is the one slide in which I'll tell you what we do. Our DMS acceleration service, we've done this for a half dozen or so clients now. We build out a 6 to 18 month roadmap for implementing DMS activities. So essentially, we figure out what you should do in what order, and it looks something like that. And then we actually get 1 to 3 of those tactics running for you. So you're actually seeing proof in the pudding. So it gets you real results, and it gets you a plan for moving forward. And this is what we've done with Rotman, and the group is running quite well now, doing really interesting work. Partly following the plan, partly inventing their own stuff, but moving forward. We're currently doing this for SunGard Financial Systems, so it's not unique to higher ed. It does count across the spectrum of organizations, and my sense is that it probably gets you using the DMS much more quickly and more effectively than you might otherwise. What we actually do when we do this, we take a really hard look at your existing analytics to figure out where the barriers are on your site. We talk to the stakeholders to figure out what marketing should be accomplishing and isn't, or where the weaknesses are. And then we figure out what quick wins are available, and we do them. So that's acceleration services. That's kind of what I do for a living when I'm not doing the CFO role and not doing this talking to you guys. But I hope that's useful as an introduction. Pim, did you want to come up and talk about the Rotman School of Management? And did you want to go to the website, or did you want to go to...
Yeah, let's start with the website so that you guys can see what it is we built. Just so that you know the kind of logic, we worked really closely with Joe on this project, and the whole sort of logic of it was that when students are considering doing a major degree in advanced business, they take a long time, and so the whole premise was that the site had to be a discovery, that our time on site is almost unheard of how long people are spending here. So you have to give them the information they need right away, but then they keep coming back and they keep coming back and they keep coming back. So the whole kind of homepage slider approach. Randy, I'm not sure how your mouse works. This is very weird. Oh, there. Okay. All right. Great. Is a kind of the beginning of that journey. So. We have this sort of parallax scrolling, which takes you through a range of offerings and high sort of aspirational ideas. And then very quickly and always, there are these large menus. So wherever you are, you can get to any of the parts of the site that you want. So one example that you might find interesting is some recent grads. So if you go here, you can see it's a very visual site, and you can sort of launch on a profile of this really amazing MBA candidate who was actually on Bill Clinton's worked for his charity, and then this is on a sort of a weird dial-up thing, but there's a video of Christine. So these sort of beautiful profiles, and then you can watch her talking about I don't know if but anyway, you can see what I mean. So it's a very visual site, and it's a very dynamic looking site, and we're getting tremendous sort of traction on it. Simon's here from the executive programs area, and they've done some really beautiful work as well. So some of their courses and offered public courses are here, and you can see in the way the system works that they've got tabs, which is a form of a widget, which has all of their different types of programs here that you can choose from. You also have right rail widgets here, which are
you click into and you can contact someone, you can learn the application process, you can sign up for a newsletter or whatever the case may be. So you'll hear us talking about things like right rail widgets when I go into the presentation. We also have on this area a lot of social media integration. So we have a social media hub which has feeds from, there's a lot of dynamic feeds coming in here from various social media channels, student blogs, Twitter, Pinterest, YouTube. We have a pretty active YouTube channel. We have lots of Twitter feeds, and you can see the range of Twitter feeds that we have all kind of clustered together here. And we also have, a whole bunch of really interesting research going on. So you can search research by topic. And what's fun about the research by topic grid is that it's dynamically fed by the press releases, so that you can see, for example, here, all of this content is dynamically fed from other parts of the site. So it's a really cool. Well, we're super proud of it, and it seems to be performing reasonably well. And we are just super grateful to Joe and the Nonlinear crowd for helping us come to this place. And probably the most remarkable thing about it is that we have about 40 different people who maintain content on it across the organization. So it is extremely well, it's working extremely well for us from a point of view of distributed content authorship, which is a huge part of why we went into this whole thing. And Simon's smiling in the back because she knows what an improvement it is on our previous platform. So let's go now to what we've actually been doing with this from a DMS perspective. And I would just sort of preface this by saying that it is very, very early days. We really just embarked on this in a serious way, I would say, this spring. So we're really just starting down a very exciting path. And what we've discovered to date since we launched the site is that we have an increase of 20% in unique visitors to the site over the last year, 9% increase in page views per visit, and an 8% increase in the time spent on site. So pretty significant metrics by, I think, any measure. We won the Sitecore Site of the Year award for the education sector this past year, and we won based on mainly the homepage slider, but also the use of photography throughout the site, the EduStyle Higher Ed Web Award for use of photography. So we're pretty proud of what we've been able to accomplish so far. And now we go into our sort of DMS journey. So we partnered with NLC, and we came up with a short-term plan to do some A/B testing. Now, before we had our site, we used to use Facebook to do message testing. So we would try, to our demographic, is an MBA worth 84K, and then we would try is an MBA right for you? We would just play around, and we would watch to see how people responded. And so we were excited to be able to do this inside our site. So this will tell you what we did there. Then we were also really excited about the ability to personalize by geography, because we have 50% of our MBA class, for example, comes from around the world. And we were really wanting to appeal to them and to make them feel welcome when they came to our site. So we were really excited about using geography in some way, shape, or form to tailor content. And then Randy discovered through a deep dive in our analytics that there's a very consistent behavior pattern with visitors in terms of, first they come and they want to find out a certain set of things, the second visit they want to find out another, third and fourth, they're incredibly weirdly consistent in their visitor patterns, which is really kind of cool from the point of view of serving up content to them. So we wanted to explore that further. On the midterm, we wanted to play around with this sort of domain IP stuff. So if I come in from a company, can I serve up relevant content that might be useful to you? And what we haven't really done yet is this search term piece. We still have some thinking on that. And I would say we're kind of like herding cats, because Randy's given us this great plan, but we're kind of going off on our own. So that's kind of funny. So the first test, and just chatting with Saima before speaking to you about this, this again is super early days. We put this up. Randy had the suspicion that we could get more people clicking through Contact a Learning Advisor if we made that Learning Advisor button a little bit more prominent. So we set up this A/B test where Test A was what had been there before, and Test B, very subtly, you can see it's a darker color with a kind of a little envelope. So this was just a kind of a very simple test to see whether presenting that contact link a little bit more prominently might drive people to behave differently. And what's interesting is that we actually think that it's true to say that it doesn't. So this was kind of a cool test in and of itself. It's also, it's great to know that you're, one could say, oh, this is a failure, but no, actually it's not. It's kind of cool because you kind of know that, well, that color of the link maybe doesn't have that large of an impact. That being said, we want to keep this going because Simon suspects that the numbers are quite low.
Just a comment, I guess. So I was probably wrong. That happens. That's part of what A/B testing is about. You wouldn't test if you knew it was going to work, right? But the important thing, one of the important things to realize is that the Sitecore DMS makes it very easy to do these. So you can afford to do a whole bunch of really small tests because it's easy to implement and figure out whether it worked or not. If you have to go through a whole bunch of work to implement them, you simply can't do enough tests. And so that's why this maybe wasn't the most brilliant idea I ever had, but we'll see.
Yeah, Brandy, it was kind of lame, actually.
They can't all be winners.
Now, would we take that to another one that we tested, which was really quite interesting, and we had to bring this one down. This kind of had its own traction, and so you can see some interesting data here. We had still a few spots left in our program, so we wanted to kind of say, it's not too late, start now, kind of create a sense of urgency. So we ran this test from July for 32 days, where we had the language, start your application today, versus apply now. So we thought, oh, start your application today would create a sense of kind of urgency and that, everything was still possible. And it colossally failed. Everybody just really liked the very simple promise, apply now. So very, very inexpensive test to run. Didn't have to go out to Facebook to figure that one out. Just was able to figure out, okay, so the simpler the language, the simpler the call to action, the more traffic we'll drive. So that was like a very, very interesting and very useful little test. Any questions or comments about it?
Yes, but it's also more visually appealing with like the personalization of like a picture there, right? It's less words, right? Like it's
right.
It's not just the button, right? Like which would be interesting if you actually tested A/B like with just the apply now changing, right? Because it's a very different looking kind of space to me.
Yeah, it could be there's more things going on there for sure. Yeah?
So you ran the test for 32 days. How exactly did you run it? Did you run test A for one day, test B for the next day, or was it integrated throughout 24 hours?
It's absolutely depends on your browser session. So you go in and it's one thing, and then if you even go back to that page, it'll be another. If you hit F5 and refresh, it changes. So it just changes depending on when you're in that session. Isn't that correct?
Yeah, it randomizes 50-50. There is a sticky feature, so that will always be the same for you, so you can determine what you want to do. You have lots of options there. I think for the A/B testing, usually, or ABC testing, usually would be randomized, because that kind of takes in some of the time variations. When you're testing other things like personalization, you sometimes have to work over time. It doesn't lend itself to sort of real-time testing, but I think that's the answer.
Yeah, and what's interesting is, we had 11,726 visits in that space, so it's statistically relevant, I would say. So now we go on to our first personalization test, which was personalization by geography. And we had this idea that it would be interesting to present for students coming from China to do a little bit of an exercise or a test on having some Mandarin content available for them. So we created this widget called Fast Facts for International Students Mandarin Edition. And it's really just basically all of our major proof points in one page, kind of legal-sized, printable document. It's sat on the right rail. And we put it up there. And one of the things that Sitecore, and I'm looking to the Sitecore reps to realize, there is work to be done on Sitecore analytics. So we're a little bit struggling to know whether this was working. We knew one of our colleagues was in China, and he sent us an email excitedly saying, "It's alive, it's working, you could see it." So, and we also used, we did a switch out in China for all of our videos, which of course they can't see YouTube, so all of the videos that people in China see on our site come from Youku. So that was another amazing thing to be able to do, because otherwise, if you're there, all you see is just a black box. You don't see anything. So that's been another really exciting thing that we've done. But so anyway, we weren't quite sure whether this Mandarin one-pager was working. So Randy, of course, came to the rescue and did a little bit of research for us. And very kind of preliminarily, the page that this is on is a kind of not terribly exciting page, and it really is just more of a bridge page into a series of other layers of content. But what we're finding is that students from China or visitors from China are spending a lot longer on this rather cursory page. So we are assuming now that they are reading the Mandarin edition, which is really quite good. And they're obviously staying longer as well because they're opening up the PDF and reading it. So it's been kind of a neat thing to discover. So both the switching out, the ability to present Youku videos and the ability to present this kind of custom content in their own language has been quite an interesting little test. The other, and I guess more exciting test for us, is this one. I meant to bring these up 1 second. We do a lot of MBA fairs all over the world. It's one of the biggest places that we source great candidates. And what we did this year was we created these one-page documents for each region. So this is coming from India, consider Rotman. Coming from the Middle East, consider Rotman. We have them for China, Latin America, range of other zones. And what these one-pagers do is they bundle content that we know for sure they're interested in. And it uses language that the students from those areas use. So Indian students are always wanting to know about WorkX. How much work experience do you need? They also want to know, how are you going to make my career shift? And they have like a certain way of talking about their experience that this one-pager is full of. So we incorporated the way they speak. And then further to that, we created a custom URL. So it's rotman.utoronto.ca/India. So it's on these one-pagers, and we're giving these out at the fairs. Plus, if you come from India, you'll get a custom homepage slider, which is the one that you see here. So you saw those big sliders. Coming from India, consider Rotman. And then you click in to learn more. And there's a whole microsite there, which is absolutely stunning. It has some pictures in the middle of some recent Indian grads, some of our faculty who are teaching about India. We have an India Innovation Institute, as well as some of the key proof points about the program coming to Canada, immigration requirements, spousal, work permits, all kinds of things that are very, very relevant to people coming from India. So this is quite exciting. This is basically on here on the right is the one-pager on both sides. And then you'll notice there's a consistency of look and feel to the microsite behind it. So early stage results, and again, this is early stage, is that the bounce rates are lower and time on site is longer again. So again, that notion of delivering relevant content seems to be remarkably powerful.
and that number is bounced right from the home page. So those that are presented with the personalized, coming from India page seem to react, are much less likely to bounce than those that don't see it. So that strikes me as a powerful indication that it's working.
And Randy, how are you doing the print? Is it the adaptive print, or are you?
No, this is a completely independent print system they've done, so it's not on demand. It's
Okay.
Yeah, the print is only for the fairs themselves.
Right.
Yeah.
This is the point. Sitecore has something called the Adaptive Print Studio, which allows you to build on-the-fly customized PDFs and then print them out based on what the person's done. So you can tie it into DMS, et cetera, but you're not using that product right now. Others are.
You didn't tell us about that product,
You
Randy.
don't own that product.
You can buy it.
No way. Anyway, so here's the custom homepage for China. And again, it corresponds to a one-pager. And then here's the custom homepage slider for the Middle East.
Your visuals are cityscapes of Toronto, clearly. Have you used images of individuals? You played around with that?
Yeah, so we most of our imagery on the site is of individuals. The logic behind using the cityscape is this idea of presenting Toronto in a way that it feels very exciting, very metropolitan, very exciting, really cool. Playing off the CN Tower, which is also, the iconic image of the city. That you're not coming to, that Canada's not some sort of backward place where everybody's on snowshoes and things like that. So that was really kind of the logic behind making it look like a serious place. And the India one, you'll notice is the homepage slider is actually from our schools. So this is from the roof of our school. So it shows how close we are to downtown, which is significant when it comes to access to key employers, corporate sectors, just being in the heart of it all. So that was sort of the logic there. But it's a good question, and I'm about to talk to using individuals in another way, which I hope will be useful. So we talked about visit number, and what Randy discovered through digging painfully through our analytics was that when prospective MBA students first come to our site, what I want to also say is that our site is a very, very well visited site. We have really remarkably high traffic, and the majority of it is to our full-time program. So it's our flagship program. That's not to say there isn't a whole bunch of other amazing content on there, and that's all accessible through the top nav. But we tend to focus on the MBA because it is such an important part for our school. So it seems that the first thing that they want to know is how much is it and can I get in? So we created a homepage slider which is exactly speaking to that. Is it right for me? How much does it cost? How do I get in? And then you can find out that information right away. And the second one is, well, why should I choose Rotman anyway? Like, what's great about you? And so we say, #1 business school in Canada, and then you click through and they're all the rankings, and the rankings are feeds from the Financial Times, from Business Week, and all of the things that we've done particularly well in. So that's a sort of why Rotman. And then what will I learn and who will I learn from? So this is about our faculty, and we've just launched this really cool research on nudging, which is how marketers nudge you into behaving in a certain way. It's quite fascinating. And so if you go through to this page, we also have a massive online open course through Coursera that's launching in a couple weeks that teaches you about behavioral economics and nudging. So it's kind of trying to get at that. We're on the cutting edge and we're doing really interesting work. Then the next one is, okay, now it's a call to action. Come to an info session either online or in our building. So these are the info sessions that you can go to in the different programs that are offering info sessions. So that's been an interesting thing. We haven't really seen, I don't think we can say particularly, it's too early, whether that visit number is working or not, but intuitively it feels like the right thing. And you can see through this, there's the pictures on the homepage are all very sort of people oriented, and so that's picking up on your comment below.
What the data showed when you looked at behavior by visit number was a really clear progression from like, should I even be looking at this? Can I afford it? Would they accept me through this exact process you talked about? And so personalization based on visit number is one of those rules-based personalizations. It's really easy to do in Sitecore, and so doing this just makes sense to actually execute. It will take some time to figure out whether or not it's working, and I think we have to look at its bounce rate, because it's more likely to get people into the site from the homepage rather than bouncing. But it's only been live for 2 or 3 days, so the numbers are very good.
Yeah. But anyway, it's just a fun and cool thing to do.
Randy, what were you using for analytics again? Were you using ours or Google?
No, in this case I was using data from before the DMS was running, so I was using Google Analytics.
Okay.
I'll speak that a little bit at the end.
Okay, good.
So what we're working on now, which is interesting and fun, is domain targeting. So we have a lot of people working in finance. If you go through this is the other thing Randy discovered, that a ton of people coming from the big banks are coming to our site. And a lot of them are looking for master's programs, either an MBA or an MPhil. And so depending on the company domain protocol, we can serve up featured content that shows recent alumni and prominent alumni. So for example, if you're from the Royal Bank of Canada, everybody, no matter whether you're in wealth management, commercial banking, personal banking, all have the at rbc.com at the end of their email protocol. So let's say Jane Doe comes in from RBC. She sees on the homepage a beautiful big slider with this great picture of Amit, who has recently graduated, and he's an associate in RBC Capital Markets. There's a little profile of Amit. He was a software engineer from India, and now he's switched into banking. So kind of cool. Then if, let's say she clicks into the MBA, on the right rail, it'll also have an image of Deputy and Vice Chair RBC Capital Markets, Jamie Anderson, who's also a Rotman alum and who also is on our Financial Services Advisory Board. So if I'm coming from another company, I'm coming from my company, I can say, oh gosh, some people from my company are already here. I can relate to Amit, and oh my God, I didn't know that the deputy chair is a Rotman grad. That's kind of cool. So it just kind of solidifies that idea, builds on that sense of loyalty that you have to your company, or at least a sense of connection you have to your company, that hey, this is a place that would get me somehow. This is a place where I could succeed. So that's something we're playing with, which we're just working on now. The next one, and this is really quite exciting. We have we have 11 research institutes, and many of them are working on research that has impact on public policy. And it's important that levels of government, we feel it's important that levels of government understand the kind of research that we're doing and can learn from some of the stuff that we're working on. So the Martin Prosperity Institute, for example, is one of our sort of flagship centers, and they do a lot of work on cities, the creative city. They do a lot of work on democracy and democratic capitalism. They do a lot of work on governmental structures and the optimal infrastructure for societies to succeed. So if you're coming to the MPI, we're working with them now, and you're coming from a City of Toronto IP, we would be able to serve up 2 of the latest research reports we've done on transit, for example, or the casino idea that was in play for a while. So, you know, you could create a custom experience for people coming from the City of Toronto, which featured your highlights on what you've learned about cities and how cities work. Secondarily, if you're coming from the province, we do a lot of work on the creative economy. We do a lot of work on transportation funding. All these things are key for provincial governments to be concerned about. That research would be presented. And finally, from the Government of Canada, love this sort of selling sex in Canada, which is something that Stephen Harper would probably cringe about, but nonetheless, really important to have this kind of research out in front of people and hopefully help them to think more deeply about issues, or at least understand some dimensions of it that they may not have considered before. So this is a kind of an interesting and exciting thing that we are really looking to do, is kind of a simple form of advocacy for the research work that we do.
I like it's kind of like our Constitution needed a personalization rule, right? Is that a provincial or a federal responsibility?
Yes, that's right. So kind of in conclusion, I would say that we've kind of just begun our DMS journey. I think our strongest sense right now is that A/B testing is going to be really interesting from a language that drives action kind of point of view. And we're looking forward to using it in all kinds of ways, but that so far seems to be directionally really strong. One thing that is certainly true for us is the consideration cycle for somebody doing an MBA is very, very long. And we've just introduced a new CRM system. So the long-term gain, obviously, is to connect the CRM into Sitecore and begin those kind of engagement plans, but it's too early for us to be doing that now. So all the stuff we're doing now is stuff we can do and stuff we can control. So the GeoIP, very, very exciting prospect in terms of lowering bounce rates and increasing time on site. And then every day we're thinking of, once you get down this road, you just kind of can't stop your brain, from thinking of new and cool ways that this thing could be used. And really what it enables us to do, and this is kind of an increasingly interesting trend in this whole industry of marketing industry that we're in, is we have as marketers so much autonomy from IT. It used to be, to do any of this kind of stuff, you'd have to call on your poor little IT colleagues who would not really get it, and then you'd go back and forth, and now we can just stand these things up on ourselves. We can have a custom site up in half an hour, and we've got designers, we've got a great bank of photography, we've got great video, we've got a writer on site. We can stand stuff up in no time at all without batting an eye. So it's remarkably flexible and costs us essentially nothing to do. So we're really enjoying it. Anyway, I hope you found it interesting.
I have 2 slides left, and I promise we'll take questions. Pim, thank you very much. I didn't know about the YouTube switch out for, was it Youku that you're using?
Yeah.
That's brilliant. That's wish I could take credit for it. It's not the way it works, though, eh? Shoot. So a couple thoughts on measuring success. I think Pim even illustrated that the ease of setting things up, I think Sitecore is best in class and letting marketers do what marketers should be doing. But if you're not measuring whether it's working or not, you can't get better. Sitecore's got a bunch of ways. That's my phone going off, by the way. It's impressive. Thank you, Dan. Sitecore itself has a number of reporting options, and they're increasingly improving. We saw some wireframes of the next version of the analytics within the product. They mark a fairly substantial step forward. What we found is that most of our clients prefer to use their existing analytics tool. If they're comfortable with Omniture and they've got analysts trained in Omniture, they want to continue using that. Everyone we've worked with has Google Analytics installed. Like everyone, even if they have Omniture and other analytics installed or Web Trends, they're still using Google Analytics. So what we've done is we've developed an integration engine for Google Universal Analytics, the new version of Google Analytics, and the Sitecore DMS that allows you to take all that fun information that Pim's been setting up and then view it in Google. So if you wanted to see whether your personalization was working, you could look at your personalization rules as segments within Google Analytics and understand bounce rate or time on site. It just lets you use tools you're used to view the data within Sitecore. So Darren Granacci and I have disagreed about this for about 6 years now, but we think long-term people are going to continue using analytics tools that they're familiar and comfortable with, and that those will remain independent from the CMS space, whereas the ability to execute those rules, the DMS itself, is going to be an increasingly integral part of any content management solution. More information, come to nonlinear.creations.com. We have lots of white papers, although as I realized when I walked in, Joe has nicely printed all these out and left them outside, so you don't even have to go to the website. Take a look at our blog as well. This month is A/B testing month at Nonlinear, so I think just about every day for the month you'll be seeing a new article on A/B testing, conversion optimization, and the Sitecore DMS. I don't know what our topic is for next month. Do you know, Joe? We'll figure that out. Okay, well, there's lots of content. Take a look. Follow us at Nonlinear. Tweet is the corporate one. I'm at Randy Woods on Twitter, and then you'll be sure to be up to date with whatever we're publishing. And that's what we have. I hope that was helpful.